I heard my own breath, rough and too loud in the quiet hallway. For the first time in my life, I realized I sounded like a stranger to myself. My lungs pushed air in and out with a strange urgency, as though trying to warn me of what I was about to see or feel. It was late, well past midnight, and every inch of the house felt laden with silence. My eyes swept across the dark corridor, the edges of the doorways casting faint, ominous shadows in the sliver of moonlight that slipped through the window. That was the moment I first felt superfluous, like a visitor in my own home. The couch in the living room was littered with the day's usual mess, a couple of tossed throw pillows, a half-finished glass of water left behind. But somehow, those ordinary details looked staged, as though someone had set them there to impersonate normal life. My wife, Lisa, was in the bedroom asleep, or so I believed. Our son was in his room, presumably lost in childhood dreams. And yet, I could hear nothing but my own breath in that thick, suffocating darkness. I took a hesitant step forward and felt the floor creak under my weight. An instant later, I heard Lisa's voice from our bedroom. She was murmuring, but not in that soft, half-awake tone people have when they're disturbed at night. It sounded hushed, urgent. I stayed still, my body tense, my mind full of half-formed questions. Then her phone buzzed. Muffled, but audible. I couldn't make out the words, just the low hum of a man's voice, a voice I didn't recognize. Something in me twisted. My breath caught. I froze near the bedroom door, my heart thudding so heavily I felt it in my ears. Lisa's voice pitched higher for a moment, then dropped into an intimate, almost conspiratorial whisper. I heard her laugh softly, and that laugh felt like 1,000 tiny knives pressing into my ribs. I forced myself to step back from the door, not ready to fling it open or demand an explanation. I don't know why. Maybe I was too shocked to move, or maybe I was already steeling myself for the truth. In that moment, I understood that the gap between us was far larger than a dark hallway. It was a gulf I'd never realized had opened in our marriage. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my alarm, and found Lisa by the mirror, combing her dark blonde hair. She glanced at me with a slight nod, like any other day. I waited for her to say something about last night, whether she'd heard me in the hallway or if she wanted to mention a phone call. She said nothing, only gave me a thin, polite smile that didn't reach her light brown eyes. I tried to steady myself. If I confronted her right away, I'd have to be ready for everything that came with it. The questions, the accusations, and maybe even her denials. Instead, I got dressed for work, my mind swirling with unspoken suspicions. I left the house and drove to my office in the city. The radio was on, but I never registered a word of the morning talk show. My mind kept replaying that muffled male voice. It was a low tone, confident, familiar in a way that suggested I'd heard it before, but I couldn't place it. All day at work, I found myself drifting. Meetings blurred together. My colleagues asked for updates on projects, and I gave automatic answers. My head pounded with the weight of a secret I hadn't even defined yet. Was Lisa just talking to a friend? A colleague? Some random phone call? But why the hushed tone and the laughter that felt so intimate? As soon as I got home, I looked for her phone. I wasn't proud of myself, but suspicion can turn the most trusting man into a thief of privacy. She kept her phone on the kitchen counter while she cooked dinner, and I saw the passcode screen lock me out. She'd changed her code. I stood there, leaning against the counter, staring at the device like it might leap up and strangle me. My stomach churned. Lisa came in, a cutting board in her hand. "Mark, everything okay?" she asked, scanning my face with mild concern. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired," I lied, stepping away from her phone. "Long day." She accepted that explanation a little too quickly and turned back to dinner. I watched her from behind, noticing a tension in her shoulders. Or maybe that tension was in me, and I was reading it into everything she did. Over the next few weeks, the suspicion lingered. It followed me like a second shadow. "Lisa often worked late," she said, or had some school event. She was an elementary school counselor. Her job did have its share of after-hours obligations, but something felt off. The time she said she'd be home got later, pushing boundaries that never used to be pushed. One evening, I found a date jotted in her paper calendar, evening with D. It was on the same day as our wedding anniversary. My gaze locked on those 3 words, each letter digging into my chest like a blade. D. Who the hell was D? When I asked her casually about our anniversary plans, Lisa feigned a look of confusion. "Oh, that's this Friday, isn't it? I'm so sorry, Mark, I have a school workshop." I totally spaced. "We can do something on the weekend, right?" I nodded, swallowing the bitter taste of disappointment. No mention of D, no apology that sounded genuine, just a perfunctory promise to celebrate later. I said nothing, but my mind was burning. Later that night, while she showered, I snuck into her phone. She'd left it unlocked by accident. I went straight to her messages, scrolling fast. My hands were shaking, adrenaline making everything feel electric. That's when I saw the conversation with someone listed only by an initial, D. I tapped on it. The texts were half-coded, half-explicit. They referred to meeting in the library, discussing lessons, lingering after the students left, then short bursts of what could only be passionate exchanges. One line made my eyes sting. "I'll be yours completely, even for just a night." My heart hammered. Another message. "I can't wait to see you again." Followed by emojis I'd never seen Lisa use before. Playful winks, hearts. I felt a hot wave of nausea. My wife was having an affair. And there it was in plain text. Her phone locked again abruptly. I must have triggered a setting. I stared at the blank screen, furious, wounded, and somehow eerily calm all at once. She was in the shower, water rushing behind the bathroom door, as though it could wash away her secrets. I wanted to confront her. I wanted to kick open that bathroom door and demand the truth. But I remembered how, last night, my son had run up to me, hugging me, beaming about a picture he'd drawn in class. He saw me as his father, the man who would do anything to protect him, the man who belonged in this house. I couldn't tear everything apart on impulse. Instead, I began to watch, observing Lisa's every movement, every phone call, every text that made her light up in a way she no longer did around me. I slipped into a habit of subtle interrogation. I'd ask simple questions. How was work? See any friends today? Did you meet anyone interesting? And watch her face. She always blinked a bit too fast, her lips tightening before she answered. The truth was there, behind each carefully chosen word. Her eyes were often distant, as though she were mentally elsewhere. She'd wear nicer clothes on days she had these workshops, add a touch of extra makeup. When she returned home, her smile felt forced. My questions turned cold, my tone sharpened, but I never accused her directly. I let her suspect that I was simply in a grumpy mood from the office. At times, I'd see confusion flash in her eyes, but she never pressed me. Meanwhile, I did some more digging. D, I discovered, was Daniel Fisher, a part-time college tutor Lisa occasionally hired for special reading programs at her elementary school. I saw an email chain referencing him. He was younger than her, by a few years, apparently well-educated, articulate. The kind of guy who'd slip into a woman's good graces with his literary quotes and easy charm. I hated him without even meeting him. My imagination ran wild with images of them together, in some corner of the library after hours, locked in a tight embrace. The way her hair would tumble over his shoulders. The way she might whisper his name. I felt a white-hot fury that made my hands clench into fists. One night, a few days before our anniversary, I decided to stake out the school. I left work early, telling no one. In my car, I parked across the street from the building's entrance. It was almost sundown, the sky tinged with a deep pink glow. My breath quickened again, the memory of that sensation in the hallway rushing back. This time, I wasn't powerless. I had to see it for myself, or I'd drive myself insane with speculation. I waited until about 8 p.m. A handful of staff filtered out, heading to their cars. Lisa was nowhere to be seen. At 8:30, the big front doors opened, and out came a man in a casual blazer, dark hair, a slim figure. He paused and turned back to the doorway. Lisa stepped out next, carrying a folder, her face bright with a smile that didn't look like the one she gave me anymore. She gave him a playful swat on the arm, and he laughed. Then they walked to his car together, side by side, shoulders almost touching. She looked happy, so vibrant that it made my heart twist. I wanted to storm out of my car, drag him away from her, demand she pick me or him right there on the street. But my anger was overshadowed by a crushing sense of heartbreak. I stayed in the car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, witnessing the final confirmation of what I already knew. He opened the passenger door for her. She got in. My stomach lurched. They drove off. I followed them at a distance, headlights off until I was sure they wouldn't notice me. The city lights glided by as we weaved through traffic. Eventually, they stopped at a small restaurant on a quiet street. I parked around the corner and crept close enough to see them through the window. They sat at a table near the back, leaning forward, talking in low voices, their fingers grazing over each other's hands. He brushed a strand of hair off her cheek, and she let him. Then, in the dim light, they kissed. My mind exploded in fury and despair. The sight was more intimate than any explicit act could have been. That gentle kiss spoke of growing closeness, maybe even real affection. I felt both enraged and hollow. I wanted to smash something, or maybe just scream. Instead, I took out my phone and took a picture. A petty, pathetic act. But part of me wanted proof I wasn't going insane. Proof of the life I was losing. I didn't sleep that night. In bed, Lisa breathed softly beside me. She smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't the one she usually wore. Something warmer. Probably for him. I stared at the ceiling, counting the hours until dawn, trying to piece together a plan. I had a child, a mortgage, and a wife who was stepping out with another man. If I confronted her, there'd be a war. If I turned a blind eye, I'd become a ghost in my own home. I decided I had to confirm one more thing. I needed certainty about my son. There had always been a mild question about the timeline of her pregnancy, but I dismissed it as paranoia. Now I couldn't. I got a paternity test kit the next day, feeling like the lowest form of snoop. I hated myself for having to question the legitimacy of my own fatherhood, but I couldn't live in doubt. A few weeks passed. I still played the role of the clueless husband. Lisa went on with her life, or what I assumed was her double life. I kept my interactions with her minimal, short. She seemed relieved that I wasn't pressing her with too many questions, and yet there was a tension simmering beneath every word we exchanged, like the crackle of a radio tuned to the wrong station. On the day of our anniversary, I came home with a simple bouquet of lilies, purely for appearance's sake. She wasn't even there. The house was empty and quiet. Our son was at a friend's place for a sleepover. Alone in the silence, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the flowers. They looked so pitiful, a symbol of a marriage that had become a pantomime of love. My phone rang with an alert. The results of the DNA test were in. Clicking through the email, my heart drummed in my chest. I scanned the lines once, then again. The child I had raised, the boy who called me Dad, was not mine. Biologically, we shared no DNA. The words on the screen blurred. I dropped my phone onto the table as though it had burned my hand. My chest felt crushed, my breath ragged. An invisible weight pressed down on me, heavier than anything I'd ever experienced. I wanted to scream, to break everything in the kitchen, to tear the cabinets from the walls. Instead, I just sat there. A cold, empty resignation seeped into my bones. My marriage was a lie. My role as a father, at least biologically, was also a lie. Anger rippled through me like a hot wave, but it receded just as quickly, replaced by a numb sense of clarity. Lisa had been living this deception for years. Whether the father was Daniel or someone else from the past, I didn't know yet. But the betrayal was total. She came home around midnight, eyes bright with the glow of someone who'd had a romantic evening. She looked surprised to see me awake. I sat on the couch, the lilies lying wilted on the coffee table. She paused by the doorway. "Oh, Mark, I thought you'd be asleep." I stared at her, memorizing every detail of her face. She was flushed, maybe from wine or from Daniel's company. My gaze drifted to her hair, slightly tousled. Her lips parted as she tried to gauge my mood. "Busy night?" I asked softly. Her face tightened. "School event ran late," she replied. Then she noticed the flowers. "You got me lilies." "Yeah," I said. "Happy anniversary." She didn't approach me, didn't touch the flowers. Instead, she shifted on her feet. Yeah. Sorry I'm late," she muttered. The air was thick with tension. I wanted to confront her then, to see her scramble for excuses, but the words curdled in my throat. Instead, I let a silent pause stretch too long. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I held up a hand. "I'm exhausted," I said. "Let's just forget it." She blinked, looked down, then went to the bedroom. I remained on the couch, listening to her footsteps fade. I could sense confusion in her body language, but also relief, as though she was glad I wasn't pushing. And so, the cold interrogation continued. I was the one asking quiet, pointed questions, and she was too afraid to ask me what was really on my mind. In the weeks that followed, I planned my exit. But I needed to make sure that when I left, it wouldn't just be me taking the fall. I'd spent too much time being a bystander to my own humiliation. I wanted to reveal her betrayal not in some explosive confrontation, but by letting her realize she'd lost her stability. I started monitoring her communications more closely. I found more messages from Daniel, more references to secret meetups, and glances stolen in the hallways. She confided in him about her frustrations, some of which were about me. I discovered that she'd been dissatisfied for a while, apparently finding me too closed off or set in my ways. Reading her words felt like an autopsy of our marriage, laid out for this other man to dissect. Every time I saw Daniel's name, I imagined his face, smug, certain of his hold on her. I nearly confronted him in the school parking lot one afternoon. I was standing by my car, and he crossed my line of sight, wearing that casual academic style. But then I realized that knocking him into the pavement would do nothing but blow up my own life. Instead, I focused on a different kind of payback, letting them both unravel under the weight of their own secrets. I bided my time. I feigned indifference around the house, even managing a faint smile when Lisa breezed in late from meetings or student events. Our son was the only real anchor holding me to that house, though the heartbreak I felt whenever I looked at him was a fresh wound that never healed. I was terrified about losing him, about the boy discovering the truth. In many ways, he was innocent, caught between an unfaithful mother and a father who wasn't his father after all. One night, Lisa came home, face pale, eyes wide. She said she'd run into some trouble, but refused to elaborate. The guilt, the stress, it was starting to eat at her. That same night, I heard her crying in the bathroom. I walked over, about to knock, then pulled my hand away. I just listened to her muffled sobs through the door, feeling both pity and rage. The tears might have been for Daniel, or perhaps for herself. I didn't care. I turned away, leaving her with her quiet despair. I finally set my plan in motion on a crisp fall evening. Lisa had just left for another rendezvous with Daniel. Our son was at a friend's house, and the timing was perfect. I gathered my important documents, a few changes of clothes, and every piece of evidence I had. Photos, text screenshots, the paternity test results. I placed these carefully in an envelope, then tucked it into a side drawer in our bedroom, leaving just the corner visible. I wanted her to find it, but only after I was gone. I spent the next few hours walking through the empty house, touching the walls, the furniture, the frames of pictures that once held memories of a happier family. I found our wedding photo hidden behind an old lamp in a dusty corner, as though she'd stashed it away so it wouldn't remind her of her vows. I stared at it for a long moment. We both looked so hopeful, so convinced of our future. My chest felt tight, but no tears came. I had none left. I left a simple note on the kitchen table. I know. Nothing more, nothing less. Then I walked out. I don't remember closing the front door. I just remember stepping onto the driveway, the faint glow of the porch light illuminating my feet, and realizing I'd never enter that house again as her husband. My heart pounded with a mixture of fear, anger, and a strange, unsettling sense of freedom. In the weeks that followed, I stayed at a cheap motel first, then moved into a modest apartment not far from work. I called my sister in Seattle to let her know I was going through some marital trouble, though I didn't explain the extent of the betrayal. I felt a grim satisfaction imagining Lisa coming home to an empty house, finding my note, then opening that drawer to discover that I had known all along. I expected a barrage of phone calls and texts. At first they came. Lisa's messages were frantic, disjointed. "Mark, where are you? Please, let's talk. We can fix this. You misunderstood. It's not what you think." They piled up in my voicemail like a cluster of sad confessions. I listened to some of them just to hear her voice quiver, but I never responded. Eventually, her tone shifted to anger, then to guilt, then back to desperation. I remained silent. My revenge wasn't loud or violent. It was the vacuum left by my absence, a mirror I held up to her so she could see exactly what she'd done. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she stayed with Daniel. She probably clung to him out of necessity, or maybe out of whatever twisted love they'd nurtured. I didn't care anymore. I only felt empty relief. I had escaped the tangled web of her lies, and in doing so, let her bear the weight of her own choices. But leaving wasn't the end of my torment. I missed my son. Even though the blood test showed he wasn't mine, I still thought of him as the child I'd raised. I worried about him day and night. Did he understand why I left? Did Lisa tell him the truth, or did she spin another lie? I reached out to a lawyer for advice about visitation. The lawyer explained the complexities. Legally, I was his father in many ways, but biologically, no. It would be a long, tough road. In the meantime, Lisa wasn't letting me see him. My calls went unanswered. My messages to him were politely intercepted. It was as though Lisa wanted to erase me, just as she had replaced me with Daniel. One evening, about 2 months after I'd left, I received a single text from an unknown number. It was my son, using a friend's phone to contact me. "Dad, where did you go? I miss you." My chest cracked open with pain. I texted back, telling him I was sorry, and that I'd never stopped caring for him. We exchanged a few short messages. He didn't know the real reasons for everything, and I didn't want to drag him into an ugly mess. It was enough to know he still thought of me as Dad. I cried for the first time in ages, letting tears roll down my cheeks in that cramped apartment. That kind of heartbreak never truly goes away. Time passed in a blur of gray days and restless nights. I filed for divorce silently. I declined mediation, letting my lawyer handle the details. I asked for no alimony and made no demands. Lisa, from what I heard, was shaken. She tried to stall, to renegotiate, but I never wavered. During the final hearing, where I appeared in a suit that felt too tight, and she arrived with Daniel at her side, I spoke only when necessary. We locked eyes just once. I saw shame, regret, maybe even love in her expression. But I refused to meet that gaze for long. This was the price of her betrayal. As we left the courthouse, she followed me down the steps, Daniel lagging behind. She touched my sleeve, her voice breaking. "Mark, we can talk, can't we? Please, just a few minutes. I'm so sorry." I turned and looked at her. Her eyes brimmed with tears. She stepped forward as if to embrace me, but I stepped back. "You made your choice. I said quietly. Then I glanced at Daniel, who stood awkwardly a few feet away, his face flushed. You both did. She inhaled sharply, tears dripping onto her cheek. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. I never. I shook my head, cutting her off. You took everything from me. Everything I believed in. She opened her mouth, but no words came. For a moment, I thought I would see her crumble right there on the courthouse steps. Then Daniel placed a tentative hand on her shoulder, and I stepped away. I walked off without looking back, ignoring the emptiness in my chest, letting the final door close on a life I once cherished. Months turned into a year. I changed jobs, moving from project management in that same tech firm to a smaller startup in a neighboring town, needing a fresh environment. People said I looked different, thinner, older around the eyes, maybe quieter. But I had found a strange kind of peace in my silence. I had no illusions about happiness, at least not yet. But the anger that once gnawed at me had begun to fade, replaced by a stoic resolve. One day, while going through some storage boxes in my apartment, I found a photo of my son and me fishing by a lake. He looked so excited, holding a tiny fish on the line. I remembered how proud he was. A wave of longing hit me. I wanted to reach out to him again, so I called that friend's phone number he'd used before. The friend answered and passed the phone to my son. It felt surreal, hearing him talk about everyday things. His new favorite video game, a recent birthday party. He asked why I hadn't visited, and I tried to explain in the gentlest terms. He sighed, sounding older than his years. I miss you, Dad, he said quietly. Mom doesn't want me talking to you, but I snuck my friend's phone again. I felt tears burn my eyes. I miss you too, buddy, I managed. Then we said goodbye, and I felt both hope and despair crash into me. A few weeks later, Lisa sent me an email out of the blue. It read like a tentative olive branch. I'm sorry for what happened. I'd like to figure out some arrangement so you can see our son. At first, I considered ignoring it, but a father's heart can't ignore his child. So I replied, setting a time and place. I told her we'd meet in a neutral location, a coffee shop near the old library where she used to meet Daniel. Poetic, in a twisted way. She arrived alone, no sign of him. Her hair was tied back, and she looked pale, anxious. She clutched her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. We sat at a small table in the corner, the hum of conversation around us a subtle backdrop. I broke the silence. How is he? She took a shaky breath. He's good. He's grown a lot in the past year. He misses you. I nodded, my throat tight. And you? Are you still with Daniel? She swallowed, eyes flicking away. He's living in my place. Yes. We thought about moving, but with the school and everything, it's complicated. She paused, then forced herself to meet my gaze. I never wanted to destroy our family, Mark. I was unhappy, and I felt like you didn't see me anymore. But I know that doesn't excuse any of it. I'm sorry. I looked down at my coffee. You can't patch this up with an apology, Lisa. She nodded. I know. But maybe we can find a way for you to be in our son's life. He's not your blood, but you're still the only dad he's ever known. Her words stabbed me in a place I'd kept shielded. I don't need your permission to love him, I said, my voice trembling. I was there for everything. His first steps, his first words. Biology doesn't change that. Lisa bit her lip, tears welling in her eyes again. I'm so sorry, she repeated, as if that phrase could magically rewind time. We discussed a tentative schedule. She said Daniel was open to me visiting, which made me clench my jaw. The nerve of him to be open to me seeing the boy I raised. But for my son's sake, I swallowed the anger. I left that coffee shop in a daze. My legs felt shaky, like I'd fought a battle, but at least I had the glimmer of a possibility. Seeing my son again. Maybe that was all that mattered. Days passed, and I found myself standing on the sidewalk outside my old house. My new car was parked a few yards away. The yard I used to mow looked the same, though the flowers Lisa had planted were replaced by something else. The front door opened before I even knocked. My son rushed out, flinging his arms around me. I staggered back, tears threatening to pour out. He smelled of shampoo and chocolate, and he pressed his face into my jacket, trembling. I saw Lisa hovering in the doorway, her eyes red, arms folded around herself. Then Daniel appeared behind her, looking uncomfortable. I locked eyes with him, and something flared inside me, pure, unadulterated loathing. But I forced it down, focusing on my son, who clung to me like I was the only safe thing in the world. My own tears slipped down my cheeks as I held him, my breath shaky. "You look taller," I whispered, trying to steady my voice. He nodded, pulling away just enough to beam up at me. "I am. Mom says I might outgrow you soon." I laughed softly, despite everything. That moment was pure and untainted. I gently ruffled his hair, my heart twisting with love and sadness. Lisa cleared her throat. "Come inside," she offered quietly. I hesitated. The mere thought of walking back into that house made my stomach churn. But my son tugged on my hand, and I followed him in. The interior smelled the same, a faint mix of coffee, vanilla, and something else. Maybe cleaning spray. The furniture had been rearranged, but it still felt too familiar. Daniel lingered in the living room, offering a tense nod in my direction. I gave him a curt nod back, no words exchanged. I could see the flicker of guilt in his eyes, maybe regret. But neither of us spoke. Lisa retreated to the kitchen, giving me space to reconnect with my son. We sat on the couch while he told me about school. He still loved drawing, had joined a little art club. I asked about his favorite subjects, his friends, the things he'd been up to. In that moment, nothing else existed. No betrayal, no heartbreak. Just a father and a child bridging the painful gap. After an hour, Lisa drifted in and said it was close to bedtime. I nodded, not wanting to overstep. My son glanced between us, then hugged me again, burying his face in my chest. "You'll come back, right?" My voice nearly cracked. "Yes," I said. "I promise." He ran upstairs, and the moment was gone, replaced by the uncomfortable presence of Lisa and Daniel in the same room. I stood, preparing to leave. Lisa ventured a small step forward. "Thank you for coming." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to remain civil. "I'm not doing this for you. Just remember that." She closed her eyes briefly, exhaling shakily. "I know." I walked out the door, Daniel's gaze burning into my back. Part of me wanted to say something, some final condemnation or threat, but I kept walking. Silence was my weapon, and I was done wasting breath on him. That night, in my cramped apartment, I sat on the couch, letting the weight of everything settle. Meeting my son again had torn open wounds I thought were starting to heal, yet it also felt like a form of redemption, a reason to keep going. Maybe I had lost Lisa, lost my illusions of fatherhood, but I wasn't losing him entirely. My mind drifted to the day I discovered her affair, the day I realized my marriage was a sham. It felt distant now, like a bad dream. The furious stream of thoughts that once devoured me had quieted, replaced by a determined calm. I remembered all the silent observations, all the times I'd asked her simple questions and watched her fumble with answers. I remembered my breath in that hallway, how it had been the only sound in a house full of secrets. That silence had become my shield. I never confronted her with screaming or accusations. I let her drown in the quiet knowledge that I knew every detail. I walked away, leaving behind a note and a stack of evidence. My revenge wasn't an outburst, it was an absence. She'd learned that not every man reacts with fists or furious words. Some men just leave you alone with your guilt, and that can be the worst punishment of all. I poured myself a stiff drink and thought about the meaning of revenge. For a long time, I'd pictured vengeance as an eruption, me exposing her affair in front of her friends, or beating Daniel to a pulp in the school parking lot. But that would have left me broken and possibly jailed. Instead, I found a quieter path. I liberated myself from the lies. And maybe in doing so, I liberated Lisa too, from the pretense she'd been living. The price was high. My trust, my marriage, the illusions of fatherhood. But I was no longer caged by betrayal. I was free. As I sipped my drink, the city lights outside my window flickered in the distance. My phone buzzed with a new text from Lisa's number. I stared at it for a moment, then picked it up. The message read, "He wants to see you again this weekend, if you can. He misses you." I typed a brief reply. "I'll be there." Then I set the phone aside. The old me might have been tempted to read into her words or wonder if she still had feelings for me. But I'd reached a point where none of that mattered. I had something more important to hold on to. The chance to be present in my son's life, even if I wasn't his father by blood. I leaned back against the couch, letting a slow exhale escape my lips. My breath no longer terrified me the way it once had. The memory of that night, standing in the hallway, thinking I was superfluous, it was fading. I had found a place for myself, not with the woman who betrayed me, but in the role I chose to keep: caretaker, mentor, father figure. And in that silence, in the calm darkness of the apartment, I let out a whisper that was meant for no one but me. I'm free. Maybe revenge wasn't a final reckoning. Maybe it was just the act of stepping away from someone else's war. Maybe it was the realization that we can't win if we stay trapped in the lies. Leaving might not fix all my wounds, but at least it gave me a chance to heal. Sometimes that's all we can ask for. So I sat there, letting the hush of the city night wash over me, feeling no urge to speak, no urge to scream. For once, the silence felt like peace instead of pain. And in that quiet moment, I finally let go of the life I'd lost, stepping into whatever waited for me next. And I closed my eyes, breathing in, breathing out, until nothing was left but a dull hush in my chest.